It is always remarkably intimidating. I stand before you for the 31st year, and every preacher will admit that the most intimidating thing in the world is to try to proclaim adequately a message that is beyond our comprehension. If any preacher tells you that he or she is up to it, you'll know they are a fraud. So it's with fear and trembling. But we turn this morning to the Gospel of John, the 20th chapter. We're going to read the original resurrection story. Then for the first time ever, we're going to skip down a few verses and read about the doubting Thomas, because it's such an important story for us. So here we go, John 20, the first verse. Early in the morning on the very first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene came to the tomb and saw that the stone was moved away from the entrance. She ran at once to Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one Jesus loved. Whenever you read that phrase, the one Jesus loved, in the Gospel of John, that's the way in which the writer of John describes himself. He was the one that Jesus loved. Breathlessly panting, they took the master from the tomb. We don't know where they've put him. Peter and the other disciple left immediately for the tomb. They ran neck and neck. The other disciple got to the tomb first, outrunning Peter. So not only did Jesus love him better, but he was faster as well. Stooping to look in, he saw the pieces of linen cloth lying there, but he didn't go in. Simon Peter arrived after him, entered the tomb, observed the linen cloths lying there, and the kerchief used to cover his head, not lying with the linen cloths, but separate, neatly folded by itself. Then the other disciple, the one who had gotten there first, went into the tomb, took one look at the evidence, and believed. Now we're going to skip down a few verses. In this interim, Jesus has gone to the upper room and found the disciples, all except for doubting Thomas. The 12th disciple, Judas, has hung himself. Doubting Thomas is not there, so 10 of the disciples are there, and they've had a chance to see the resurrected Christ. But doubting Thomas, who is not there, said, "I will not believe unless I see him with my own eyes." And so we pick this up with verse 26. 8 days later, his disciples were again in the room, and this time Thomas was with them. And Jesus came through the locked doors, stood among them, and said, "Peace to you." Then he focused his attention on Thomas. He said, "Thomas, take your finger and examine my hands. Take your hand and stick it in my side. Don't be unbelieving, believe." And Thomas said, "My Master, my God." Jesus then said, and I think Jesus said this for you and me, "So you believe because you've seen with your own eyes. Even better blessings are in store for those who believe without seeing." Jesus provided far more God-revealing signs than are written down in this book. These are written down so that you will believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and in the act of believing, have real and eternal life in the way in which he personally revealed it. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. One of my very favorite movie scenes is from a movie called On Golden Pond. If you're real young, you may not have seen On Golden Pond. It came out 20, maybe 30 years ago. I don't know. But it's a wonderful movie starring Henry Fonda and Katharine Hepburn, this aging couple in their golden years, the final chapter of their life. And Henry Fonda plays an old codger by the name of Norman, and he has heart problems. And there's this wonderful scene in which Henry Fonda has an attack of angina that is so severe and so painful that he passes out and falls to the floor. Katharine Hepburn, his wife, believes that he has had cardiac arrest and that he has in fact died. And so she falls to her knees on the floor and drapes herself over his body, weeping uncontrollably. After a few minutes, Henry Fonda gains consciousness, and he looks up and he opens his eyes and he says, "What happened?" And Katharine Hepburn, as only Katharine Hepburn can do, says, "Oh, Norman, for a moment I thought you were dead. Norman, I just knew you had died. And I could see you there in your casket in the funeral home. And I could see you were in your best navy blue suit and your favorite blue tie. I could see you in your casket." And Henry Fonda looks up and he says, "How did I look?" And she said, "Not good, Norman, not good at all." There is something about death that doesn't look good to any of us, isn't there? And surely that is the way the disciples were feeling on this day over 2,000 years ago. The morning of the resurrection, but before the resurrection. After all, they had come riding into Jerusalem, believing that they were about to set up a kingdom. They'd come riding into Jerusalem believing that Jesus would set up an earthly kingdom, that he would be King of Kings and Lord of Lords, and that they would sit on the right and left side of him. And now he was crucified, dead and buried. They'd seen it with their own eyes. And they were nothing more than losers and fugitives. In their eyes, they had bet everything on Jesus. And now they had lost that bet. And so let's be honest about this morning. Maybe some of you have come here today and you're wondering yourself about the vitality of your own faith. Maybe you're not sure. Maybe years ago you would have made that bet your life on everything that Jesus was alive. But maybe today that bet is feeling old and crusty, and you're not so sure anymore. If that's the way you feel this morning, trust me, you are in very good company. For instance, in Europe today, the cathedrals and churches of Europe today, I don't know, will be maybe half full, 1/4 full, 1/3 full. It's hard to believe, but in Europe today, there are countries where only 15% of the people profess to believe in God. Some of the Scandinavian countries, 85% of the people don't even believe in God. In the United Kingdom, in England, the birthplace of John Wesley and of Methodism, where most of the people profess to believe in God, nevertheless, only 15% of the people go to church even one Sunday out of the month. The church in England, for the most part, is gone. It's not on life support. It is in cardiac arrest. And the truth of the matter is that it's not because of militant atheists, nor agnostics, nor young millennials who say that the church is no longer relevant to them. It is because they have become lukewarm about their faith and failed to pass it on to the next generation. Maybe you've heard that saying, the faith is just one generation from extinction. Have you heard that through the years? I've heard that for years. The faith is only one generation from extinction. That always sounded like a nice, pithy little statement to me. Good for a sermon. But honestly, I never really took it seriously until now. Because that's how long it took in Europe. One generation that became lukewarm about their faith and decided that it was not important to teach the faith to their children and grandchildren, and now the church is nearly gone. What about America? Here's what the research says about America. Most Americans still believe in God. Church attendance in America is rather robust compared to Europe. But now here's the truth, and every preacher in America knows this to be the truth, whether he or she will tell you or not. Church attendance in America is plummeting. And that's across every denomination, Methodist, Baptist, Bible church, independent church, you name it. The only church in America I know that's growing rapidly is the Cowboy Church, but that's a sermon for another day. And what is most discouraging of all is that as parents and grandparents, we have decided that church attendance for our children has become optional. And we are one generation away from the church being gone in America. I promised I was going to challenge you this morning. I'm going to get to the resurrection in just a minute, but I want to finish this. This past week on Wednesday of Holy Week, I was down in Dallas. I needed to get a bite to eat, so I stopped at a little cafe. The waitress took me to the back, set me in a booth, and I was about this far away from another table On to my left here, where a young couple sat with their child who was in a high chair, maybe 18 months to 2 years old. And just as I sat down and I was looking at my menu, I could not help but overhear their conversation. The father said to the mother, "Honey, I know this coming Sunday is Easter, but do we have to go to church?" Her reply, "Oh no, don't worry about it. We'll just stay at home and enjoy ourselves." And immediately she segued into this conversation about their child's diet. She started messing with him and feeding him some food. And she said to her husband, "You know, honey, we need to get much more serious and intentional about his diet and about what he's eating." She said, "I was watching on TV, and they said on TV that it is extremely important that he develop at a very young age a good relationship with his food." And I would have been laughing hysterically had it not been for the fact that I was literally at the edge of tears. Who's going to teach this child, I wondered, that he is a precious child of God? Who's going to raise him in the faith and let him know that no matter what happens to him, God loves him so that he can be resilient and powerful and know that God has important things for him to do? Who's going to pass the faith on to the next generation? And when we lose the church in America, it won't be because of militant atheists or agnostics or young millennials who say the church just isn't relevant to them. It will be because you and I have become lukewarm about our own faith and have neglected the responsibility of making sure that our children and grandchildren are in the classrooms. Some of you might be thinking, okay, this makes sense to me, but look, give me a break. If you could somehow help me know that the resurrection is real and true, it would be a lot easier. It would be a lot easier, and so it would be. Fair enough. But here's the honest truth. I'm going to be as honest as I can with you today. I can't do it. I can't even prove the resurrection to myself. How can I prove it to you? The resurrection comes to us as a matter of faith. That's why we read this story a moment ago about doubting Thomas. It's the pivotal story, really, I think, when it comes to this issue of believing in the resurrection, believing in a living God. Jesus has come back. He's been with the disciples. They've seen him. They believe. But doubting Thomas is not there. Doubting Thomas says, "No way am I going to believe in a resurrected Christ until I see him with my own eyes." And so 8 days later, Jesus comes back and he says, "Thomas, touch the nail prints in my hands, feel the spear print in my side." And Thomas does so and he falls to his knees and says, "My Lord and my God." And then Jesus says these words which are so important for you and me. He says, "Thomas, have you believed because you have seen me? How much more blessed will those be who come after you, who never lay eyes on me, but who will believe nevertheless?" In other words, Thomas was the last one. Thomas was the last one to get to see the physically resurrected body of Jesus. So we might as well get over it. We're not going to be able to prove it to ourselves. It is a matter of faith, powerful faith. I don't know any other way to put it than that, except to remind you of what a friend told me a number of years ago. It was one of the most powerful things I've ever heard. He said, "This much is true. Either God is nothing or God is everything." That's the thing we've forgotten in today's generation, isn't it? You just can't steer a middle course. Either God is nothing or God is everything. And I don't know about you, but I know which side of that bet I'm willing to take. And I have friends. About this time last year, 2 or 3 weeks after Easter, I preached a sermon about doubting Thomas, and I talked about the apparent conflict between science and faith in today's world. Scientists are fond of reminding us that they have got it all figured out. I don't know whether you saw the article in the Wall Street Journal, other places the other day, about the gravitational waves that they have now observed, which evidently, if it all is proven out, will prove the theory of the Big Bang. And so this is what scientists will tell us that they know for sure. That the Big Bang was the beginning, and it took place approximately 13.8 billion years ago. That the observable universe is maybe 96 billion light years in diameter. But that's just the observable universe. The real universe might be infinitely larger than that. And there might even be multiple universes. So that's what science knows. Here's what scientists can't explain. They can't explain what happened in that fraction of a second before the Big Bang. They don't even attempt that answer. And science can't explain the soldier in Afghanistan who falls across a grenade and gives up his life because he believes in the power of love and he believes in God. Here's what science can't explain. It can't explain the alcoholic who has been sober for 30 years because once he got to that second step 30 years ago, I believe in a higher power, his life was changed forever. Here's what science can't explain. It can't explain the soprano who stands to sing Handel's "I Know My Redeemer Liveth," and the tears stream down her cheeks as she sings because she has met that Redeemer and he has changed her life forever. It can't explain the veterinarian in our church who, before he euthanizes a dog, kisses it on the nose and says, "Save a place for us." It can't explain what you and I know in the depths of our hearts and beings, that there is more to life than meets the eye. And science can't explain that story told to me by my friend Chuck Merrill a number of years ago before he died, about a friend of his in his church in Austin who worked for the University of Texas. He held a PhD in physics, and he was one of the world's leading experts on string theory. And Chuck said that this brilliant man would go to work every day during the week, and up in his office or his laboratory or his classroom, he would get to the chalkboard and he would work on mathematical equations and theoretical physics at a level that's just simply beyond the comprehension of most human beings. Brilliant. But every Sunday morning at precisely 8 a.m. in the morning, he would open the doorway to the back hallway of University United Methodist Church in Austin. He'd walk down the hallway and go into the little chapel where he would fall to his knees to receive communion and worship at the feet of a mystery that he could not begin to comprehend. You and I may not be that smart, but we're smart enough to know the power of this remarkable truth. Either God is nothing or God is everything. And we're smart enough to know that in America, and in your life, and in mine, and in this time and place, the time has come for us to place our bets.